Last night, the committee of 4 men and one very spoiled dog gathered once again. Before the work began, tradition demanded that we watch Gabriele Martinelli's equalizer. Not once, not twice, but so many times the dog now thinks that Martinelli actually lives in our living room, surrounded by mountains of snacks and smoky glory of grand final weekend barbecue. We debated, we scribbled, and we nearly spilled sauce on the spreadsheets. And through it all, we toiled and burned the midnight oil to craft the definitive rankings for the greatest segment in all of football YouTube. So without further ado, it is time for Anton's Tears. Well, welcome along into another edition of Anton's Tears. And before we get into any of it, make sure you are hitting the like button. Make sure you are subscribing to Hotsport. And as well, by the way, just a bit of a PSA for everyone out there. Go check out, for all our Premier League fans, my Arsenal podcast, Fire Them Cannons, with my host, Cal. This morning we had probably one of my favorite episodes we've ever done with Newcastle, which was our first ever Thunderdome episode. So go and check that out. Make sure you're hitting the like button on that video also. And also subscribe to Fire Them Cannons, right? It's not just Arsenal all the time that we're talking about there. Like today, we spoke about Newcastle 50%, and it was a good time. It was a good time. But that's not what you're here for. You're here for our tears heading into match day 6. Let's not waste any time. Let's begin. Bottom row. Not qualified. And the reason I say not qualified for Wolves is because they are the only side yet to get on the score sheet in terms of points. They have lost all 5 of their opening matches. So it was the easiest bottom tier I have had the entire season. Now, they've gotten out of jail up till now in terms of the tiers because Villa had yet to register a goal. But now, there's nowhere to hide for the Wolves. They are the bottom team in the league. And, they shouldn't even qualify to be on this list, let alone, they should be happy with number 20 and the 10th tier. Moving on up. When Aston Villa. This one is called Fall from Grace. And the reason why it's Fall from Grace is because both Villa and Brentford were sides that were, mid-table or better or comfortable in the league over the last maybe half a decade. Villa especially were pushing for European places. In fact, I believe they're still in the Europa League this season. And by the way, congratulations. They scored their first goal. It had to be against 10-man Sunderland. But a goal is a goal, so they're off of that dreaded bottom tier. But still, the performances have just not been good for Villa. Very underwhelming. And for Brentford, as we've said, their squad has been depleted. They started off really well against Fulham. But, they got absolutely played off the park, really, by a Fulham side that are probably coming into the season, probably here around this area. How did I say? I've had the 15th ranked team in the league. So, fall from grace. Once teams that were so comfortable in this league are now in danger of the relegation zone after 5 weeks of the season. So we're about halfway to that point where we really start to take the table seriously, which is around that 10-game mark. So they got 5 games to redeem themselves and get themselves back to where they should be. But for now, they're pretty damn low on these tiers. Moving on. Whitewater rafting. Now, I don't know how many words or how many phrases I can stick together or activities that can basically just describe living on the edge. Not quite bottom 3, but you're playing some dangerous games. Now, Burnley, I got to give it credit to them. They stuck it. They're looking a lot more of a sneaky side than I thought they would be. They're probably above schedule. I thought that they would be bang on the worst team, and I say that every week we come in. But again, they picked up an impressive point against Forest, yet at home. But if you look at some of the last few matches, right? Like they took United to the brink last week. They took Liverpool to the brink, and this time they finally got some points against a Nottingham Forest team that was 7th last season. So Burnley are fighting. They are fighting, and who is also fighting is Leeds. And Leeds had probably the best performances come into the league last week. They went 1-0 down, I believe, to Wolves. Was it 1-0 down, or was it? Let me check that. They did. They went 1-0 down to Wolves away from home, but then everything started to click. By the way, shout out to my favorite player in all of the league, Anton'S. What a great name, and what a great free kick that he scored for Leeds. They're starting to feel comfortable in the league. I thought that they might survive relegation. This tier is kind of basically surviving relegation. And so look, Leeds, all the league promoted teams have really given it a good shot this year. I gotta say, so far, they've been probably the best newly promoted sides of the last few years in terms of being able to show their credentials that they are, a team that probably could stay up in the division past this season. Now, Forest and West Ham. Another home defeat for West Ham. I literally were going to film the segment of managers under pressure, and I considered Graham Potter for managers under pressure, but then I thought, it's West Ham. Like, their standards have clearly dropped because they have lost every home game this season to London rivals. And he still kept his job. So if he's still in a job by now, you would have thought they would have fired him already, right? Look, I said don't count them out a couple weeks ago, and I think it's time to count them out soon. But they're whitewater rafting at the moment. They still have the talent, the ability to keep themselves in the league, but somehow, some way, they got to turn it around. Forest, again, I feel like we brought this up last week. We brought this up a week before. Why make the change? Why make the change at manager? What's the point? And again, since then, their performances, like, they started off the season very strongly, I thought. I thought they put in, some really good performances early on. They showcased why they were, in and around Europe last season. And I just don't know what's going on with that club. I don't know what's going on with the club. Their levels, in terms of their commitment, their play on the pitch is not what it was last season. And again, went to Burnley, right? They go ahead up really, really early, and then that's it. That's all she wrote. Then they should be beating Burnley. Like, I know they're not like your traditional top 6 side, but they're trying to work their way there, and I think they've almost at this point completely blown it. Next up, Tyne Weird. Now, I know you're saying Tyne Weird Derby. I get it. Funny name because you put Newcastle and Sunderland in the same tier. But yeah, I'm just going to admit it. Fulham has got nothing to do with this name. I have Fulham on the same tier, but I'm like, how many times am I going to have Newcastle and Sunderland on the same tier? And by the way, big up to Fulham. again, they had their first real comfortable game of the season. A lot of them have been nail biters. This time, I think they really showcased their ability against Brentford at home, a team that's probably around them in terms of talent. And yeah, it was a very convincing home win for Fulham. Some former Gunners playing really well. Alex Iwobi, he got on the score sheet for sure for Fulham in this one. Yeah, Wilson has been a really good player. That was a really nice finish as well. And yeah, I think Fulham have been decent. Now, a week ago, let's get into the Tyne weird part of this. A week ago, I was saying, look, on the way up was what I called the tier for Newcastle. And I just gotta say it. I was on the podcast with the Newcastle boys this morning. And they're very confident playing Arsenal this week. But still, what was that? Going to play Bournemouth and basically playing defensive from the beginning? Like, this is supposed to be a team that's on its way up. It was just a very weird game, not what we were expecting to see at all from Newcastle. Like, I was thinking, this is when their season is going to start to kick on. And of course, I said that game could go either way, and it went neither way. It went to a draw. But I just think it's bizarre. It's bizarre. After what you saw against Barcelona, and I bigged them up for that a week ago, even though despite defeat, I was expecting them to, ride that wave and take advantage and actually give Bournemouth their first, real disappointing result of the season, and they couldn't do it. And another one, Tyne weird. This is the weird part. Was Sunderland. So again, we mentioned about Villa. They got their first goals of the season, and it needed Sunderland to go down to 10 men. But beyond that, though, Sunderland stuck in. They got themselves an equalizer in the 75th minute. It was just a weird game. The disparity between their home and away performances. This time they played at home against Villa, and they stuck to it. It was just a bizarre, two very weird games. That's why I said Tyne weird. Again, two different sides of the spectrum. They should be. Newcastle should be higher than, what is this? 10, 9, 8, 7, the 7th tier. But they're yet to break through that ceiling, and I hope to God it's not this week when they play off. Something's got to have to give between those two sides. Moving up. A fair reflection. So the reason why I said a fair reflection to the season is, I think given sort of the sample sizes that we've seen from both Brighton and Everton, this is about where I expect them to be, which is just straight up middle of the pack. And yeah, look, Brighton again, another. And by the way, and I should just say, but on the performances for both of these teams, I know Everton lost, but they went 2-0 down. They showed character. Really good goal by Idrissa Gana Gueye, and they pushed to properly steal points from their rivals from Anfield, and a lot of different narratives are taken on that, and it's interesting that people don't keep the same energy for Liverpool. Like, they think that Liverpool should be dominating whatever, and yeah, like, they're perfect 15-15, and we'll get to that. But the performances are still far from convincing, and Everton really, like, I thought, I picked this for Upset Alert last week, so it's the one that I didn't get right. But I think Everton's in there. They showed that, like, they're not going to get bullied this season. And they're right about smack dab in the middle, around mid-table. And Brighton, again, this one was an Upset Alert correct by me. And they did. Look, you got to say, when you 2-0 up at home, you expect to get the 3 points. But they all held on for a draw, despite Tottenham's comeback. And look, they've had some really good, again, as you said, like, their performance away from home and at home are vastly different. And that's exactly why they're starting in the middle. You know, they're not poor. Like, you know, it's like this 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off. And again, two really solid. Like, think about it. Man City, you got a win against Man City, and then you've also not taken points off Spurs at home. So, yeah, I think this is just about right. A fair reflection on the season for these teams so far. Next, better than you think. Better than you think. And congratulations to Ruben Amorim and to Manchester United, who, you got to say, played their way into the 1-man advantage over Chelsea. Like, I know Chelsea had the keeper sent off, had Sanchez sent off, but it was a result of Man United, you know, making them uncomfortable and going after them in their attacking areas. I thought, again, another one, upset alert that I called last week. I got this one right. And yeah, I think Man United just, you know, because they're Man United and, you know, they're not performing up to the standards of Man United, and everyone that's like one of the top 6 sides are kind of like looking at them as a bit of a joke, and everyone's, you know, enjoying their misery. They're doing better than you think. So through 5 games now, I believe they have now 2 wins, and then, you know, 2 defeats, and those 2 defeats were against Arsenal and Man City, titled contenders, and a draw against Fulham, who, you know, it's probably a disappointing result, but I think they're better than you think, and I think they're going to start to get on a little bit of a roll now. They got Brentford, I believe, it's the early kickoff this weekend. It is away from home. Yeah, look, I expect them to take the 3 points on that. And then you got Crystal Palace again. Better than everyone thinks. I think they're going to have a puncher's chance this week against Liverpool. I think similarly to how Everton did, but they're at home, and you know, Liverpool have struggled there. And again, they went to West Ham or London Derby, got the job done. They've had some good performances this season. Again, and I mention this every week since the transfer, despite Eberechi Eze, you know, despite Eze leaving, Oliver Glasner has got this team playing well, and Jean-Philippe Mateta, again, seems to be scoring all the time when I watch Crystal Palace. So, like, both of these teams kind of, one of them mocked, one of them slept on, but they're both better than you think, and they'll be pushing, you know, for European place. And speaking of which, the next tier, whoa, and that's, of course, that is, if anybody knows, that is the, I mean, you're watching this show, you probably know, that's the tune for the Europa League and the Conference League, actually. I don't watch Conference League, but when I heard Conference League, it's the exact same tune, and that's where it feels like these 2 teams are heading, and like in 2 different sort of moods. Chelsea are heading there because they've yet to win in the Premier League since the international break. They're showing me that they are a level below the best 4 teams in the land, and that includes another team from London that I'm about to bring up on here, and they're tier below the, we said from the top, it's below the big 3. And Bournemouth are whoa for other reasons, which is like, I think they could be playing in the Europe next year. They're I know it's like, it's a big conclusion to draw after 5 games, but sometimes you see consistency, and you see that there's a level, and you see that a team, I think a team can maintain that. By now, after seeing, you know, the Villas, the Newcastles leap up into where they are, and people thinking they were going to drop off in those seasons, to seeing Forest do what they did last year, and it's just like, when teams start off looking this consistent, notice it. It's one thing if the teams are picking up the results, but it's looking shaky, and you're like, okay, well, they're here for now, but they're going to drop off. Bournemouth just seemed like they've been better than United this year. They've been better than Palace. They've been one of the more consistent sides in the league this year. Right? I mean, they've got the same amount of points as Arsenal. And by the way, not just I should also state this as well. They have the same amount of points as Arsenal, with almost as tough of a schedule. So the two hardest schedules so far this season have been Bournemouth and Arsenal, and both of them are on 10 points. So Bournemouth's first 5 games of the season is no fluke. I'm just going to double down on it, by the way. I see Europe in their future. Next up, tailgaters. Now, do you guys know what a tailgater is? Now, it's not the people who wait outside of NFL games and make barbecues. That is a tailgater, but it's when somebody, like, let's say, tries to sneak into a building and getting access to the building by waiting outside for the person who lives there to go through so they can follow them in. That's what I feel Man City and Tottenham are right now. I feel the title race is between the two teams that are yet to be mentioned on this screen, but these two teams are kind of staying in viewpoints. Like, again, I need to stress this once more. Like, we are 5 games into the season. This is match week 6. Tottenham, right, are also on the same amount of points as Arsenal. They're on 10. City and Arsenal drew last week. They're on 7. So they are 8 points off of Liverpool, but they're 3 points off of Arsenal. And, you know, if you look at the last few results, you got that win against Man United, that huge win against Man United. You know, the Champions League game against Napoli. And then, you know, they were close to getting the 3 points at the Emirates. Sorry. When I talk this much, sometimes my mouth gets dry. But yeah, so they're just sort of kind of just right behind the leaders. Tailgating. Next up, and I'm about to rattle a lot of cages with the next two. So hold your horses. And everyone's going to think that I have an agenda. But just information, this is the committee and the algorithms that spit this out. And it was not yours truly. 15 from 15. That's right. I have Liverpool as the second tier on the tiers. And you're going to be like, what the fuck is this guy on about? Pardon my French. They're 15 from 15 and they barely played well. This is scary, as everyone likes to say. You know, and I feel like you're not looking at all the information. They're 15 from 15, but their schedule isn't been nowhere near as difficult as the team that you know I'm putting at the top. And you can be like, what? They're 5 points clear. Like, you know, but let's be honest. And by the way, add the Leone injury into it that happened in the midweek. Again, as well, they barely beat Southampton, Championship Southampton at home in the Cup, despite, you know, their new striker Alexander Isak scoring, which, by the way, big deal. Oh, you know, he scored and everybody watch out. Bruv, that was a gift. Southampton literally passed that directly to, I forgot who was the teammate who assisted Isak on it. I think it was like Chiesa or something like that. Chiesa or Bradley, I forget. And then he just tapped it in. And then Ekitike taps another win later on to get the winner, and he pulls off his shirt, and, you know, it's just really weird behavior. But, like, the list is piling up of two nil leads that have been thrown away. They haven't won by more than one this all season. Like, everyone's like frothing over, you know, good 15 to 20 minute spells that Liverpool are putting together, but I'm seeing it the other way. And people think I'm looking at it being like jealous or being triggered and being fearful. And of course, a part of it is, you know, the competitive side to me. But I was told, and then this is the standard that everyone's literally setting, and they're not keeping the same energy. I was told that this team was easily, you know, the best team in the league, and they're running away with it. And the table could say, look, they're 5 points clear. But you know who Arsenal dropped those 5 points to? Like they've had the toughest schedule so far in the league. Like Liverpool's schedule has included the likes of Burnley and Everton and Bournemouth. And look, and you can even say as much as Newcastle. Look where Newcastle right now are. Like, I keep using Newcastle to qualify, but Newcastle have only got 1 win through 5 this season. Like, the Champions League game, they let Atletico come all the way back from 2-0 down. They let Bournemouth come all the way back from 2-0 down. They let 10-man Newcastle come back from 2-0 down, and they've gotten out of jail so many times. I'm sorry, you can get out of jail a couple times in the season. I call that champion mentality. But they're starting to make a habit. Oh, the scary part is they can only get better from here. I get that. And the tiers will reflect that if that is the case. But through 5 games of the season, not all 15 out of 15 is created equal. Okay, yeah, they're perfect for now, but here's the truth. The next team, Arsenal, who I put at the top of the table, and yes, I called it top of the tiers, not the table. This is not the table. These are the tiers. So the tiers are a reflection of how I feel the teams are ranked, not necessarily where they're placed in the table. So let's look at Arsenal by comparison. Arsenal have had the hardest schedule so far this year. They also have, and by more and more people I speak to coming to my reality, and I said this early, and by the way, I'd rather say something early and be looked at crazy than say it after everybody else and looking like I'm a follower. Like, that's kind of who I am as a person. And I know this is my own team, and you're like, this isn't biased. You're basically, I know this is the tiers, just like Nick's tiers. Anton's tiers is also created so that Arsenal can be on the top of the tiers every week. I get where you guys might be thinking. But let's break down these stats, right? So Arsenal have the best goal difference in the Premier League, +8. Arsenal have scored the second most goals this season. Arsenal's schedule is the hardest schedule, and the 2 games in which they drop points to are against their main title rivals. Now, Mikel Arteta, I'll bring it up now, and he's going to get it in my other videos this weekend, has gotten a lot of scrutiny for the way the team sets up, and that's the risk he's taking. I don't agree with what he's doing. I think that he has got the most talented squad in the league, a team that I think will stand the test of time, stand the long schedule. Like, I'm not going to celebrate injuries. That's not me. Everyone knows that by now. I don't celebrate injuries. I want to beat a team when they're at their best. I like to see the best teams go toe to toe. But already Liverpool are starting to again, here's the difference, right? Well, I'll reflect this for you. Arsenal had many injuries this season. Small ones, ins and outs. Most of them are coming back now. Like, Odegaard should be back again for the second time this year. Ben White's already come back. Bukayo Saka's already come back. Nkapia is going to be out for another couple of weeks. I don't know when or where he got picked up an injury. But it doesn't seem to matter. Like, Matchweek is going to be out now. It's in and out, but yet Arsenal still able to have just great depth in the team. Liverpool had Leone, right? An 18-year-old that they signed. But given how thin they are in their defense, it makes a huge difference. So now they only have 1 center-back in reserve. And you know that Konate is guaranteed not to play every single game this season. And now, and it may not be that people aren't injured now, but you're stretching this team and you're making players play more minutes than they should. You're denying yourself the ability to rotate. And in turn, that plays a part. People might not get injured, but their performances might drop off. And that's just, again, I'd rather be on this earlier than later. So, not the table. Yes, Arsenal have got 10 of 15 points to the first 5 match weeks, and they're going to have Newcastle this week away from home, which is, a bogey side for Arsenal. Arsenal struggled massively with Newcastle, but let's say Arsenal get out of the Tyneside with a win. 3 of their opening 6 games would have been against Liverpool, City, and Newcastle. And the other ones, of course, were like Leeds, Forest, And Man United, by the way, 4 out of the 6. You got Manchester United in there, right? Manchester United, Newcastle, and then their 2 main title rivals. The schedule massively opens up. Arsenal's not going to play a top 6 contender until December. I believe we play Spurs. And then we play Chelsea, like, I think within a week of each other. But up until then, do you know how many favorable matchups Arsenal's going to have? And Liverpool still have many difficult ones to come. So again, I look this over a big schedule part of the season, and the committee agrees. Okay, Arsenal needed some magic to get a draw against City, and I think it was completely through their own doing. So like, that's where people get mixed up, and this narrative that Arsenal were being defensive is bogus, because they dominated Man City. Man City had the one on the break, and they went for 0-5-5. Like, you need to open up your eyes to see that things are changing, that Arsenal are feared. But Arteta needs to understand what he has at his disposal quicker than he has. And he needs to start playing players, especially like I understand if you're going to rotate in some of those other games, but Man City at home is not one to do it, and neither is Newcastle away. So most of Arsenal's, like, that's the thing. You drop 5 points, but in both of those games, Arsenal showed throughout the game that they were probably a more talented side than both City and Liverpool within that, and they held themselves back. There was too much of a handbrake in both of those games. That's self-imposed stuff. And eventually, if that continues, you have to count that in the check mark against Arsenal. But this early point of the season, you have to say that he's playing the long game here, Arteta. He knows that he's got enough players in his team that could stand the test of time. And I feel like that's what he's doing here, but I'm not going to really give him that excuse. He needs to pick up. But for now, they are top of the tiers. And yes, that is this week's episode of Anton's Tiers. Let me know in the comment section. I know what you're going to say. And make sure you're hitting the like button on the video. Make sure you're subscribing to Hotsport. And until next time, Anton out.